Part 1. The glass doors of the luxury hotel ballroom slid open, and every head turned. Armen Volkov, the youngest tech millionaire in Eastern Europe, stepped inside with the quiet confidence of a man who had never heard the word no. His suit was tailored in Milan, his watch cost more than most people's cars, and the international press followed him everywhere. The chandelier light scattered across polished marble floors, reflecting off crystal glasses and camera lenses, turning the evening into something that looked less like a negotiation and more like a coronation. Tonight's deal was the biggest of his career. A delegation of investors from Japan had flown in to finalize a partnership that would double the value of his artificial intelligence company. Months of negotiations, endless video conferences, sleepless nights filled with spreadsheets and projections. Billions on the line. If it worked, his company would enter the Asian market at full speed. If it failed, competitors were already waiting to devour the opportunity. There was just one problem. His translator hadn't arrived. At first, Armen didn't panic. He checked his watch. 5 minutes late. Traffic, perhaps. This city was infamous for it. He sent a quick message to his assistant. No reply. He scanned the entrance again. Still no sign of Sergei Petrov, the only person Armen trusted to navigate delicate negotiations in Japanese. A tightness began forming in his chest. His assistant, Elena, hurried toward him, her heels clicking too fast against the marble. "Sir," she said, breathless. Armen didn't like that tone. "What is it?" "It's Mr. Petrov." "What about him?" "He's in the hospital." The words seemed to echo strangely in the vast ballroom. Armen's expression hardened. "What do you mean?" "Car accident. It happened an hour ago. He's stable, but he won't be able to come." For a moment, the music playing softly in the background felt distant. The laughter of guests turned into meaningless noise. "You're joking," Armen said quietly. "I wish I was." Across the room, the Japanese delegation stood together in a composed circle. 5 men and 1 woman, all impeccably dressed. Their posture alone radiated discipline. Their leader, an elderly man with silver hair and calculating eyes, spoke calmly while the others listened attentively. They had come prepared. Armen was suddenly not. He felt the fragile structure of the evening wobble beneath him. "You said they speak some English," he murmured to Elena. "They do, but their legal counsel prefers Japanese for final contracts." "It's standard." Of course it was. Armen knew only fragments of the language. He had memorized greetings, polite expressions, and a few business phrases. Enough to impress at a dinner. Not enough to negotiate intellectual property rights, equity distribution, or regulatory clauses. He could already imagine the headlines if this failed. Volkov loses Asian expansion, billion-dollar deal collapses at final hour. His rivals would celebrate quietly. Investors would question his competence. His stock would dip by morning. The delegation began walking toward him. Armen straightened instinctively, forcing his shoulders back. Smile, confidence, control. Volkov-san, the elderly leader greeted, bowing slightly. "We are honored." Armen mirrored the gesture awkwardly. "The honor is mine. Welcome." They exchanged formalities. The cameras flashed. Champagne was poured, but it didn't take long for the conversation to shift. The delegation's legal advisor opened a sleek black folder and began speaking rapidly in Japanese. Armen caught a few words. Keiyaku, contract. Riki, profit. Then it became a blur. The investors looked at him expectantly. He nodded slowly, pretending to process information he couldn't fully understand. His heart began to pound. The advisor continued, his tone becoming more detailed, more technical. Charts were shown, clauses were referenced. Armen felt sweat gather at the base of his spine. He leaned slightly toward Elena. "Do you understand any of this?" She swallowed. "No." The elderly leader turned to Armen and asked a direct question, in Japanese. Silence stretched. Armen opened his mouth, closed it. He forced a small laugh. "Perhaps we switch to English for clarity." The room cooled by several degrees. The leader's polite smile faded just slightly. "For social discussion, yes. For legal certainty, Japanese is preferred." Of course. Armen felt something he hadn't felt since he was a struggling startup founder sleeping in his office. Fear, not the fear of losing money. The fear of losing credibility. He imagined the delegation returning home, reporting that the brilliant young millionaire wasn't as prepared as he seemed. He tried again. "We can proceed generally in English and finalize details later." The legal advisor shook his head gently but firmly. "No later. Tonight." The word landed like a hammer. Tonight. There would be no second chance. Armen's breathing became shallow. His vision narrowed. The room felt louder, yet distant at the same time. He glanced around desperately. Executives, assistants, waiters, journalists, no translator. The delegation began quietly speaking among themselves. He recognized the tone, not anger, but reassessment. They were recalculating, evaluating risk. He knew that look. He used it himself in negotiations. His empire, built over 10 relentless years, suddenly felt fragile. And then, "Excuse me, I can assist." The voice was soft, but clear. It cut through the tension like a blade. Every head turned toward the corner of the ballroom. Standing beside a cleaning cart was a woman in a simple gray uniform. She held a polishing cloth in one hand. Her dark hair was neatly tied back. She looked composed, almost impossibly composed given the attention now directed at her. Armin blinked. For a second, he thought stress was making him hallucinate. "You?" he asked before he could filter the disbelief from his voice. The woman didn't flinch. "Yes," she said calmly. "If you need a translator." A few guests exchanged amused glances. The elderly leader studied her carefully. "In Japanese?" he asked. "In Japanese." She responded immediately. Not hesitant, not broken, fluent, clear. Her pronunciation carried the subtle rhythm of someone who had not just studied the language, but lived in it. The delegation stiffened in surprise. Armin stared at her as if the world had tilted. "Where did you learn that?" he whispered. She turned slightly toward him. "I studied in Kyoto for 6 years. Japanese literature and business translation." Kyoto. 6 years. The words didn't align with the uniform she wore. The delegation's legal advisor spoke again, faster this time, testing her. She responded with ease, matching his speed and tone. The elderly leader's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Impressive," he murmured. The ballroom had gone completely silent. Guests who moments ago were sipping champagne now watched like an audience in a theater. Armin felt heat rise to his face. He had nearly dismissed her. "Your name?" he asked quietly. "Anya." Her posture was straight, but not arrogant. Calm, but not timid. "Why are you working here?" he asked impulsively. A brief flicker crossed her eyes, something unreadable. "My circumstances changed," she said simply. The delegation leader spoke again, addressing Armin through her. "She says she is available to assist if you wish." Armin hesitated, trusting a stranger with $1 billion negotiation. Absurd. But what was the alternative? Collapse. He took a slow breath. "Please," he said. Anya set her polishing cloth neatly on the cart. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. A cleaner stepping into a high-stakes corporate negotiation. She moved gracefully to stand beside Armin, not in front of him, not behind him. Beside him. The delegation resumed speaking. This time, Anya translated. Every word, every nuance. Her voice carried clarity without embellishment. When a phrase had cultural weight, she subtly adjusted tone. When a clause had double meaning, she clarified it. Armin felt the panic slowly loosen its grip on his chest. For the first time that evening, he understood what was being said. Not just the words, the intention behind them. The negotiation began to breathe again. But beneath his growing relief, another feeling stirred. Something sharp, humbling, because the empire he had built, the power he carried into every room, had nearly crumbled. And the only thing standing between triumph and disaster was a woman he hadn't even noticed when he walked in. The deal was still fragile. Nothing was signed yet, but as Anya continued translating with unwavering precision, Armin realized something profound. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it stands quietly in the corner, holding a mop. Part 2. Anya stood between Armin and the investors like a quiet bridge between two worlds. The discussion resumed, and this time, it had rhythm. The delegation's legal advisor spoke in measured, formal Japanese, outlining revised equity percentages and governance structure. His tone was polite but firm, layered with cultural nuance that Armin would have completely missed on his own. Anya translated smoothly. They propose a 48% acquisition of the Asian subsidiary, she said calmly. However, they request joint decision authority over regional AI ethics compliance. Armin frowned slightly. That clause hadn't been emphasized before. He leaned closer to her. Is that a power shift? Without turning her head, she replied softly, yes. But it's phrased respectfully. If you reject it bluntly, it may be seen as distrust. He felt a strange mix of reassurance and astonishment. Moments ago, he had been drowning. Now he had a compass. The elderly leader adjusted his glasses and addressed Anya directly in Japanese. His voice carried weight, not aggressive, but deliberate. Anya listened carefully before responding. She didn't rush. She didn't interrupt. Then she turned to Armin. He says, she began, trust is not built on control, but on shared responsibility. They want to ensure the technology aligns with regional values. Armin nodded slowly. That was more than business. That was cultural positioning. He answered, choosing his words carefully. Tell them we respect regional ethics. But innovation must remain agile. Anya translated, not word for word, but intention for intention. Her tone softened certain edges, adjusted phrasing to maintain harmony. The delegation leader listened, then smiled faintly. Armin saw it. Approval. The air in the room shifted. Cameras clicked in the background, but the negotiation table had become its own world, precise, focused, balanced on subtleties. Anya became more than a translator. She became a strategist. At one point, the legal advisor introduced a clause regarding data localization laws. It was complex, dense with legal terminology. Armin caught none of it. But he noticed something else. Anya's brow furrowed slightly. She asked the advisor a follow-up question in Japanese, sharp, clear, unafraid. The room stilled. The advisor responded. She pressed. Again. Armin felt a flicker of tension. Then she turned to him. They've included a conditional licensing clause that would allow unilateral suspension of RAI distribution under public risk review. The wording is broad. His jaw tightened. That wasn't in earlier drafts. It was implied, she replied calmly. But now it is explicit. The delegation leader watched Armin closely. This was a test. Would he react emotionally, or intelligently? Armin leaned back, processing. Without Anya, he would have signed blindly, unaware that a single ambiguous phrase could freeze his operations in Asia overnight. Ask them, he said slowly, what constitutes public risk? She did. The response came layered in diplomacy. Anya translated. They suggest alignment with governmental advisory boards. Political leverage. Control disguised as protection. Armin's mind sharpened. Tell them we agree to ethical oversight, he said, but suspension must require joint approval, not unilateral authority. Anya delivered the proposal. Silence followed. The delegation murmured among themselves. The ballroom felt suspended in time. Armin became acutely aware of the weight of this moment, the invisible scale balancing trust and caution. Finally, the elderly leader nodded. He spoke at length. Anya listened intently. Then she smiled, just slightly, before translating. They accept joint authority. A subtle wave of relief passed through Armin's chest. That clause alone protected millions, perhaps billions, in future revenue. And it had nearly slipped past him. The negotiation continued for 2 more hours. Each time a cultural nuance emerged, Anya navigated it effortlessly. When Armin's natural directness risked sounding confrontational, she softened his delivery without diluting his intent. When the delegation used indirect phrasing to signal hesitation, she quietly interpreted the underlying meaning. At one point, refreshments were served. Guests resumed murmured conversations around the edges of the ballroom, sensing progress. But at the negotiation table, the intensity remained. The final contract draft was placed before them. Pages thick with signatures waiting to exist. The elderly leader looked at Armin. Volkov-san, he said in English this time, carefully, we value partnership. Anya translated the rest of his Japanese remarks, a reflection on long-term cooperation, shared technological responsibility, and mutual prosperity. Then came the final question. A quiet one. Do you trust us? It was not about percentages anymore. It was about philosophy. Armin looked at Anya. She didn't answer for him. She simply waited. For the first time that evening, he responded directly in Japanese, halting, imperfect. Shinrai, Shimasu, I trust you. The pronunciation wasn't flawless, but it was sincere. The elderly leader's eyes softened. He signed. One by one, signatures followed. Applause erupted from the surrounding guests and executives who had been holding their breath. Champagne glasses lifted. Cameras flashed in rapid bursts. $1 billion alliance had just been sealed. And Armin knew, with startling clarity, that without Anya, none of it would exist. As the delegation prepared to leave, the elderly leader bowed to her personally. You honor your education, he said in Japanese. She bowed back with equal respect. When the ballroom began emptying and the celebration shifted into networking chatter, Armin finally turned fully toward her. You saved this deal, he said quietly. She shook her head. You built it. I only translated. That's not true. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You saw risks I didn't. You understood them. She met his gaze calmly. Language reveals intention. Intention reveals power. The simplicity of her statement unsettled him. He glanced at her uniform again. Gray fabric, name tag slightly worn, sleeves rolled neatly. Why are you here? He asked again, not judgmental now, but genuinely confused. She hesitated. My father had a stroke last year, she said softly. Medical bills accumulate faster than opportunities. When I returned home, the market was saturated. Experience abroad didn't translate into immediate employment. The irony of her wording wasn't lost on either of them. You applied to corporations? He asked. Yes. And they wanted senior experience. Or they offered internships. Armin felt a slow burn of frustration, not at her, but at a system that could overlook someone like her. He had nearly done the same. She glanced at the clock on the wall. My shift isn't over, even now, even after rescuing his empire. She reached for her cleaning cart. Something in Armin resisted that image. Wait, he said. She paused. Come to my office tomorrow morning. Her expression remained composed. For what purpose? For a conversation. She studied him for a moment, measuring sincerity. Then she nodded once. Very well. The next morning, the corporate headquarters of Volkov Technologies buzzed with excitement. News of the partnership had already begun circulating through financial circles. Stock analysts were predicting explosive growth. Inside his top-floor office, Armin stood by the window overlooking the city skyline. He replayed the previous night over and over. The panic, the humiliation, the rescue. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Anya entered. No gray uniform this time. She wore a simple navy blouse and tailored trousers. Professional, minimal, confident, different environment, same calm presence. Thank you for coming, Armin said. She nodded. You mentioned a conversation. He gestured toward the seating area. I've reviewed your background. Her eyes flickered slightly, surprised. You had access to that. When someone saves my company, I become curious. He handed her a folder. Inside was an employment offer. Head of International Communications. She didn't open it immediately. You barely know me, she said. I know enough. He walked toward the window again. I built this company believing intelligence was everything. Strategy, data, prediction models. He turned back to face her. But last night reminded me of something I forgot. She waited. Talent doesn't always sit at the table. Silence settled between them. I need someone who understands more than numbers, he continued. Someone who understands people, culture, language beneath language. He met her eyes directly. I need you. For the first time, emotion flickered clearly across her face, not arrogance, not triumph. Relief, but also caution. This is not charity, she asked quietly. No, he shook his head firmly. It's investment. She finally opened the folder. Her eyes moved across the terms. Salary, triple what she earned at the hotel. Executive authority, international travel, strategic decision input. She closed it slowly. I will accept, she said. Not excited, not overwhelmed, certain. That afternoon, an internal announcement stunned the company. The hotel cleaner who had appeared unexpectedly at the negotiation table was now part of the executive leadership team. Some executives whispered, some questioned, but Armin silenced them with one sentence during the press conference later that week. When my company stood on the edge of collapse, he told the cameras, it wasn't a billionaire who saved it. It was someone I almost overlooked. He paused deliberately. Brilliance doesn't always arrive in a tailored suit. Behind the stage curtains, Anya stood in a fitted business jacket, watching the flash of cameras. Her life had shifted in less than 24 hours. But what moved her most wasn't the title. It was recognition, not of her language skills, but of her value. As the applause echoed, Armin stepped away from the podium and joined her backstage. Ready for the next challenge? He asked. She allowed herself the smallest, knowing smile. I've been ready for years. And in that quiet exchange, something more powerful than a business deal had formed. Respect. Because sometimes, the strongest foundation for an empire isn't capital. It's the voice you almost failed to hear.